Kenduck's classroom, where my motto is, don't get fooled again on your next history test. This presentation is the second artifact lecture in my lesson on the 9/11 attacks. Featured in this particular video are the Ladder Company 3 fire truck, the Slurry wall, and a brick from Osama Bin Laden's house in Abbottabad, Pakistan. Let's start off with artifact number 1 in this episode. What you are looking at now is a New York City Ladder Company 3 fire truck that was recovered from the World Trade Center site after the attacks. FDNY Ladder Company 3 was located in the East Village of Manhattan, which was about a 15-minute ride to the World Trade Center. On September 11th, this truck, along with many FDNY trucks, were what was called riding heavy, meaning they were carrying fighter fighters from both the AM and PM shifts. When the hijacked flights were crashed into the Twin Towers, the shifts would usually change. However, on September 11th, the shift leaving duty decided to continue to the scene of the attacks because of the magnitude of the fires that were created as a result of the tragedy. This truck was parked on West Street near Vesey Street and responded to the fires in the North Tower. We know that at least some of the men from this fire truck made it up to floors in the 30s of the North Tower because Captain Patty Brown used an office phone to check in before the North Towers collapsed at 10:28 a.m. on September 11th. This artifact speaks to the tough choices and sacrifice that first responders made on September 11th. In fact, 343 active New York City firefighters were killed on September 11th. This artifact also reminds us that thousands of people were safely evacuated and their lives saved thanks to the effort of the New York City firefighters. Let's move on to Artifact 2. Artifact 2 is the Slurry wall. What you are taking a look at right now is an original section of the so-called Slurry wall. Before construction could even begin on the World Trade Center site in 1966, a huge trench was dug at the end of Lower Manhattan. This ditch was enclosed by a slurry wall, which had the purpose of stopping water or seepage from the Hudson River from entering the trench, or the so-called bathtub, where the World Trade Center would eventually be built in. Usually, when we think of a bathtub, we think of having water inside of it. But the goal of this slurry wall was to keep water out of the trench or the bathtub. After all, we wouldn't want water where the buildings were going to be built. The term slurry wall refers to the clay-like substance that was used to keep the trench from filling up with water during construction of the wall. After the trench was waterproofed, steel cages and concrete were pumped in the wall to create a steel reinforced concrete wall that surrounded 11 acres of the World Trade Center site. Additionally, steel cables called tiebacks were also attached to the wall and the bedrock in order to stabilize the wall during construction of the World Trade Center site. After the basement parking garage was in place and completed, the steel cables were then removed, as the steel cables or tiebacks would have become corroded if left in place. The underground parking ground garage would be used to stabilize the slurry wall. Now, after the September 11th attacks, the only thing actually holding the wall in place was the debris from the collapsed buildings. Removing the debris was going to be dangerous because the slurry wall was damaged and could have actually collapsed, which would have brought in water from the Hudson River, and that would flood the whole World Trade Center site, but the rest of southern Manhattan and also the subway system. Although a new wall was built around the original slurry wall, the view of the original slurry wall represents the resilience of not only the original wall, but the resilience of America after the 9/11 attacks. Although America could have crumbled after the terrorist attacks, instead we survived and we rebuilt, much like the slurry wall at the World Trade Center site. Okay, now moving on to artifact number 3. This is a brick from Osama Bin Laden's house in Pakistan and a shirt worn by Navy SEAL Team 6. In hiding for several years, the leader of Al-Qaeda, Osama Bin Laden, and his family had been living in a safe house in a city called Abbottabad in the country of Pakistan. Now, what had happened was Bin Laden was killed by United States Navy SEALs during a raid on May 2nd, 2011. You're looking at an actual brick from Bin Laden's house from Abbottabad, Pakistan that was finally demolished in 2012. This brick was secured by a Fox News correspondent named Dominic DiNatale, who had been reporting on the war on terror and the manhunt for Osama bin Laden. DiNatale chiseled this brick as a souvenir while he was covering the war on terror and the news that Osama bin Laden had been killed by the United States. Now, on the night of May 1st, 24 members of the United States Naval Special Warfare Development Group raided bin Laden's compound, arriving by helicopter and entering the compound with explosives. Intended for under body armor, this shirt was worn by a member of SEAL Team 6 who was present when bin Laden was killed in his house. The success of this high-risk mission ended a global manhunt that started even before 9/11 and what ended up with the ringleader of Al-Qaeda terrorist network being caught and killed. Thank you very much for tuning in to episode 2, and enjoy the rest of the lesson.